Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable and pleasing in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. There is a song in our hymnal from which I borrowed the title to this sermon, What Gift Can We Bring? And the first verse of that song goes like this: What gift can we bring? What present? What token? What words can convey it, the joy of this day? When grateful we come, remembering, rejoicing, what song can we offer in honor and praise? Now this song and the lyrics that go with it, it seems to me, presents us with a question that I'd like all of us to consider this morning. And that question is this: what gift can we bring to God in the coming year? Now, oftentimes when people think of gifts, they assume that it takes money, or that it is money, or at least a gift card. And it's true that churches do need financial gifts. But today I want to ask a different question, a larger one, because the gifts that we can bring to God can be thought of, I think, in a variety of ways. So the question is this: what are the ways that you can give a gift to God in the coming year? Perhaps they include the following: your time, your talents, your resources, your prayers, your commitment, your leadership. Now, I know that everyone here has already asked this question of themselves in some way at some time, and there are plenty of people around who are already expressing their faith in these ways. But it seems to me that this is a good thing for all of us to ask ourselves here at the start of this new year. And it's especially appropriate on this Sunday of Epiphany, when we read how the Magi brought their own gifts to Jesus and shared them with him as an act of devotion and love, so that he could begin his life in the best possible way. Now, when we turn our eyes to our Bible lesson, what jumps out to me are all the various characters in this story. First, we have the Magi following their star. We have King Herod and the people of Jerusalem. We have Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. Those are the characters in the story. We should also take note of the characters that are implied by the story, or the people implied by the story, and that is Matthew's audience. You see, Matthew is writing this story for a purpose, because he wants to challenge his audience with a question that's very similar to our own this morning. Matthew wants to know how his audience, the readers of the gospel, how they will respond to the birth of Jesus. Will they offer him gifts and devotion? Will they align themselves with God's purposes in the world? This is what Matthew is after. Now, today I want us to pay attention as we're thinking about and learning from this story. I want us to pay attention to the words and the actions of the Magi and King Herod, because what they do and what they say illustrate Matthew's question for his audience, as well as our question about how we might bring gifts to God in the coming year. So let's look at them in a little more detail, starting with the Magi. These guys are astronomers and scientists. They are diviners and searchers after holy things. In the story, they have seen a new star that's risen, and they are convinced that it is a sign of God's presence in a new way in the world. So the Magi set out. They travel and go, and they arrive finally at the palace of King Herod in Jerusalem, where they seek out and receive an audience with the king. Now the Magi have a question for the king. Could he help them? Could he help them find the new king who has been born that the star has shown them? So verse 2, we read their question. They ask him, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage," or we have come to worship him. Now we find out later that the Magi have come with gifts for Jesus, and we'll say more on that in a moment. Turning next to King Herod, who receives the visitors and hears their question. Now King Herod promises to get back with the Magi real soon with an answer. He goes off to consult with his biblical scholars, and then he goes back to the Magi and tells them this: we have an answer. He sends them to Bethlehem, the city of David. It's there that they will find this newborn king. Now Herod in the story, he has one more request to go along with this gift of information. In verse 8 we read what he says. He says, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you've found him, bring me word, so that I too may go and pay him homage, so that I too may go and worship him." Now we find out soon enough that Herod has really no intention of honoring Jesus. The reasons for his action, all of the political stuff behind it, we'll leave aside for another time. But I want us to be very clear this morning just exactly what it is that Matthew is describing. Now Matthew uses an interesting word in this passage, one that I think sounds a bit odd to our modern ears. In the Greek, the word is proskuneo, and it means to worship or to pay homage to. Now, if you read or watch books, let me try that again. If you read books or watch movies, I guess you could watch a book if it's, I don't know, technology today. If you read books or watch movies that have characters who are kings and queens in them, you may have seen this phrase, to pay homage to. Now, it's not something we use very regularly. But what it means is this is how a subject responds to a ruler. Now, it's not a simple tip of the hat or high five or a fist bump. My Greek dictionary gives us this definition, and it's a little bit complex, so let me just read this to you today. Proskuneo, to express in attitude or gesture one's complete dependence or complete submission to a higher authority. To fall down and worship, not just bowing, but on the floor, on your face, hands outstretched. To do obeisance to, there's a good word, right? To prostrate yourself, falling down. To do reverence to, or to welcome respectfully. Now this is what Herod says he's going to do to Jesus. This is why the Magi say that they've come. Now I want us to be clear today that in Matthew's story, both the Magi and Herod make this claim. They're going to pay homage to Jesus. They're going to worship him. They're going to honor him. But soon we learn that their plans have very different expressions. Now the Magi go to Bethlehem with expensive gifts, with the gold, frankincense, and the myrrh we sang about in our song. They have a conversation with Mary and Joseph that is filled with blessings and words of wisdom. Everyone is honored. Now God's purposes are made real in this event. Now to contrast what happens with the Magi, Herod's plan to honor Jesus is really a deception and a lie. Herod sends his soldiers on a covert mission to kill Jesus, and they unleash an atrocity of violence in which babies are ripped from their mother's arms and killed in the streets. Now in Matthew's story, the difference, the contrast between these two could not be any more clear. Who is it that honors Jesus and stands in alignment with God's purposes? It's the Magi, who look for Jesus and find him and bring him gifts and then leave with joy in their hearts. It is not Herod who seeks Jesus like Pharaoh seeks the Hebrew children in Moses' day, with fear and cruelty, with steel and bloodshed. Now returning to our question, I'm pretty sure that none of us will ever treat anyone like Herod and his soldiers treated Jesus and the children of Bethlehem. But it's worth asking ourselves just how it is that we respond to God's purposes in the world. Now I believe that God is at work in the world all the time, in ways that are way beyond my ability to fully know or comprehend. There are times when I have a glimpse, when I have an awareness, a sense that God is nearby and that God in a moment has a special purpose for me to fulfill. But there are other times when I feel like God is distant and far away, that I am seeing things dimly as through a clouded mirror. But here's the thing. Whether I am fully aware of God's presence or not, I believe that my attitude, my words, and my actions matter. They matter because my heart can be open or it can be closed. I can be seeking God and God's presence, or I can be trying to control my own destiny. I can bring gifts of joy to the world around me, or I can express my fears by lashing out and harming people who've done nothing wrong. You see, all of us offer gifts to the world, whether we are aware we're doing it or not. All of us have the opportunity to offer good things to God and to God's children, and that is the challenge of our question today. Now, it seems to me that at the end of the day, all of us would rather be more like the Magi and less like King Herod. And that means this, that all of us must work on cultivating the ways that we seek, the ways that we respond to God's presence and God's purposes in our lives and in the world. Now, in a way, this is what our hymn teaches us. Going back to verse 2, what gift can we bring? The hymn asks. We read this: give thanks for the past, for those who had vision, who planted and watered so dreams could come true. Give thanks for the now, for study, for worship, for mission that bids us turn prayer into deed. So my hope, my prayer for all of us in this new year and on this day of Epiphany is that our lives would be filled with light and love, that our devotion to Jesus would be pure and joyful, and that we will find ways to honor him as we honor all of God's children by our gifts in the coming year. Amen.